Have you ever had a moment that you just never wanted to end? That's what we're talking about in today's episode. Well, hey, welcome back to another episode, another edition of 50 Stories from the New Testament that everybody should know. And today we're talking about moments, particularly like moments in the presence of God, moments, spiritual moments that really you never want to end. They could go on forever. And I don't know if you've ever had one of those moments. I grew up in church. I grew up in a Pentecostal church. And so there were a number of moments in my story of those heavenly, divine encounter where the only way really that I could describe it was like we were there and then God was there. Like heaven opened and the God who is omnipresent suddenly was very present, and I don't... I have a master's degree in theology, and I can't really tell you how that works out exactly. But what I do know is that those stories mark us. They become part of our story. They become part of our journey, and we may even say, like, I was saved, but then it felt like I had this moment and I was saved all over again. They just mark us and really have a forming, they're formational, they're transformational. And so today we're looking at one of those stories from Luke chapter 9, the Transfiguration. So Hope, tell us this story. It's such a great one.
This is one of my favorite stories. It's kind of funny, and you see just this, really get some insight into Jesus's prayer life, I guess. The first thing before what we know as the Transfiguration happens is that Jesus is getting away again. This time he's taking his followers with him and going to spend a little bit of time with that smaller group of apostles, teaching them. And so they're together, and Jesus says, "Who do people say that I am?" Okay. And they're like, "Well, John the Baptist. Some people say you're John the Baptist. Some people say you're Elijah or another ancient prophet raised from the dead, come back to life." And so Jesus looks at them and says, "Well, who do you say I am?" And Peter says, and this is a really momentous thing for Peter, he says, "You're the Messiah. You are the Messiah sent from God." And so Jesus in that moment warns them, okay, but it's not time to tell people who I am. So, he's like affirming what they say, but he's like, it's not time to tell people. And then he goes into this sort of like want moment for them. And he says, "The Son of Man must suffer many terrible things. He will be rejected by the elders, the leading priests, and teachers of the religious law. He will be killed, but then on the third day, he'll be raised from the dead." And then he says, "If any of you wants to be my follower, you must give up your own way, take up your cross daily, and follow me. If you try to hang on to your life, you will lose it. But if you give up your life for my sake, you will save it." And then he says, "What do you benefit if you gain the whole world, but you yourself are lost or destroyed?" He says, "If anyone is ashamed of me and my message, the Son of Man will be ashamed of that person when he returns in his glory and in the glory of the Father and the holy angels." And then he goes into this part that says, "Some standing here right now will not die before they see the kingdom of God." And so then 8 days later, in light of this conversation that he's just had with them, Jesus took Peter and John and James up on the mountain to pray. And as he was praying, it's recorded that his face transformed and his clothes became dazzling white. That's what it says. And two men, Moses and Elijah, appeared, and they start talking with Jesus. And they start talking about his exodus from this world and how all that's going to go down and it's going to be fulfilled in Jerusalem. And his disciples had fallen asleep. So when they wake up, they see Jesus' glory and the two men standing with him, and as Moses and Elijah are leaving, Peter blurts out, Master, it's wonderful for us to be here. Let's make 3 shelters as memorials. One for you, one for Moses, one for Elijah. But this cloud overshadows them, and it says they were terrified. And a voice from that cloud comes and says, this is my son, the chosen one. Listen to him. And then Jesus was by himself again. And they didn't tell anyone what they saw. So it's just this like nothing they or anybody has seen since, takes place in this moment, and they get to be there for it. Kind of. They were half asleep.
Yeah, I can't imagine even in all the things that Jesus has already done.
Yeah.
In front of them, miracles and healings and just these amazing multiplications of things and blind eyes, all those things. I don't know that any of that prepared them for this. No. Just imagining, the glory that would be illuminating Jesus in that moment. Even what did that look like? Yeah. Just amazing. And then to hear the voice. I just don't imagine anything really prepared them for that. And Peter actually, even kind of a fun little connection. Peter refers back to this moment in 2 Peter when he says, we ourselves, we heard the voice that came from heaven when we were with him on the sacred mountain. Like Peter refers back to this moment. So it shows us, even decades later, that this moment marked Peter.
Yeah.
I mean, we see it as he blurts out what he says, which has its own kind of interesting things, but this moment he's still talking about it,
right? And he's using it as
later.
His basis of why they should believe what he's saying.
Yeah.
He's like, I was there. I didn't just know him, but I saw this happen.
And how it formed him and his ministry, and so that's interesting. And Moses and Elijah, like, what is that about? Well, most people would talk about Moses and Elijah as the law and the prophets. Even Jesus came to say earlier in Matthew, Jesus says in the Sermon on the Mount, he says, I didn't come to abolish the law and the prophets. I came to fulfill the law and the prophets. And so you see the symbols, the kind of the emblematic people of the law, Moses, and the prophets, Elijah, standing there with Jesus. And that's interesting. Yeah. Part of the story.
I love how this kind of insinuates that Jesus heaven has these meetings.
Yeah.
While he's in his time on the earth, it's he's having these planning meetings, right? About how this ministry is happening and
it's Jesus's staff meeting.
Yeah, he's having a whole staff meeting. He's like,
come on, guys, we got some strategy.
And he's I know this is all assumed, but I'm kind of he's bringing it. He's like, come on, guys, you just come up here with me. He's like, this is gonna be fun when they see what happens at these staff meetings I have. But I love how Peter, in just the way that he always is, he wakes up. Which I'm like, was that did Jesus put them to sleep, or did they really fall asleep, in this moment? But he wakes up and he sees what's in front of him. He apparently knows that it's Moses and Elijah because Jesus doesn't, explain that. But he's like, oh, let's just stay here.
Yeah.
Lord, can we just, it's that feeling, probably a little bit of there's weariness as they go about this ministry sometimes. There's a lot. We just talked in our last video about, that was a really full day that they had. There was a lot going on. They had everything from faith to fear and doubt and miracles and just all of this in one day. And, this fisherman guy is what in the world? And so he gets up there in all of that glory in that moment in the presence of God where heaven is speaking and people are appearing, these heroes of the faith are appearing, and it's oh, Lord, can we just stay here?
Yeah.
Do we have to go back down? Do we have to this is amazing. Like, this is the fulfillment of everything we long for in front of our eyes, and, it's wonderful for us to be here, is what he says. And so there's honor in that. I think that Peter is like honoring this moment. Like, this is like the most amazing thing I've ever experienced. And at the same time, Jesus, he doesn't give them that out. He doesn't give them that invitation to be like, oh yeah, why don't you go back up with Moses and Elijah and be done with all this.
And I think Jesus knows that there's still ministry to be done.
Right.
Like that's the really tense part of living as a Christian, living as a minister, is that there are these moments that we want to just like, can I just stay in this moment and never leave? And it's like, this moment is great. But as the story goes, like the very next thing is there's a boy there with an evil spirit that the other disciples haven't been able to take care of, and Jesus is like, here, this dude, and it's like these moments are beautiful, but you don't get to stay there. There's ministry. There's people in need. There are people that need Jesus. There are people that need deliverance. There are people that need fed and healed and taught, and so have the moment. Soak it in.
Be strengthened.
Be in the glory.
Yeah.
Let it mark you.
Yeah.
For mission.
And let it remind you about what it's all about. Like,
which
you
is
want other people to come see this too.
Because that's what the voice says.
Yeah.
The voice is like, this is my son, my chosen one. Listen to him.
Yeah.
Like, he's going to tell you some stuff. He's going to give you some instruction. He's going to teach you some things. He's going to show you some things. Listen to him. Do what he says. Like, follow him. It's a revelation of the mission of Christ.
Which means God was speaking to them.
Yeah.
Because he's not telling Moses and Elijah to listen to Jesus.
Right. They've already been there.
They've
been
already
listening.
gone, actually. You know, and it's like, no, listen to him. So they literally also get to hear, like, the Heavenly Father's voice, come from that cloud.
And it's the second time the voice is spoken, because we hear the same voice at Jesus' baptism, which is really, a voice of identity. Yeah. This is my son, the one I love. In him, in you, I'm well pleased.
Yeah.
And so it's a voice. The voice is confirming or announcing his identity, and now it's like announcing his mission. It's a revelation of mission. So that's interesting too. So, all right, everybody. Hey, thanks for joining us again for another installment of this YouTube series that we're doing. We hope you are enjoying the ride. There's a lot more to come after this. We haven't even crossed halfway yet in the New Testament in our 50 stories that everyone should know. So make sure you're subscribed. Click that like button. Even hit that alert bell to be notified when new episodes get released. So until next time, we hope you have a great week, and God bless.